Okay, so we'll look at a real point issue question. This one is a disagree subtype. Now, first thing you'll notice, I'm sure, is that, look, there are two speakers, right? This is very different from most strongly supported. There are two speakers here. And the question stem here just says, Antonio and Marlo disagree over. That's how you know it's a point issue disagreement question. Now, I mentioned that there's this spectrum from explicitly stated to strongly implied on which the answer choices could fall. And you actually get a sense, right? You get a sense from the question stem of where likely the answer is going to be. We don't see it here in this question stem, but in the other questions that we'll do, you're going to see the phrase most support or strongly suggest, those phrases inserted as modifiers before the disagreement, which that's going to suggest that, oh yeah, it's implied, just like MSS. Here, when they just nakedly state disagree, right, without any dressing, that's a suggestion that the disagreement is at the surface level, so to speak, right? At the surface level, meaning Antonio just said something and Marla just says something, and you don't have to read too much into what they're saying. It's just on the surface. I like cats. I hate cats. Well, there's your disagreement. You don't have to oh, what do you mean by you like cats, right? What does that imply? Do you see what I mean? Like that's the hint. That's the clue you get. It's not. This is just it's a nice correspondence. Not always the case, but it is the case enough of the time where I think it's valuable to take note of it, right? And on top of that, there's a related reading comp point that I won't make it now, but suffice it to say that this idea and being able to figure out on the spectrum where the correct answer choice might fall on the basis of your reading the question stem, that's an important skill that shows up time and time again on reading comp as well. Okay, now the next point I want to make is I'm going to show you kind of two ways of doing this. One I'll call the intuitive approach. The second I'll call it the process elimination approach. They're different approaches. This is my preferred approach. You can think of it as an intuitive approach, as the predictive approach. This is the process elimination, slower, more methodical. Now, for pointed issue questions, I try to do this approach. Not always successful, which, okay, fine, I can always fall back on this, right? Now, for you, it depends on where you are in your studies. If you are brand new to this, you might find this approach kind of challenging, right? Okay, that's fine. Start with this approach. Work your way up towards this approach, right? This is a direction you should strive to go to. And, like I already said, it's not always successful. Sometimes I find myself falling back to this, right? But that's fine. You got two approaches, right? So let me illustrate the difference. In this intuitive, predictive approach, you're reading this stuff, you're trying to kind of figure out, predict, anticipate what the answer might say, right? Especially when the question stem tells you that the disagreement is on the surface, you might just be, oh, this sentence contradicts this sentence. There's the disagreement, right? And then you're done. Now, it does get harder. This approach is harder to implement when the question stem is coy, right? When they say, oh, Antonio and Marlo's statements suggest that they disagree over. Well, then you got nothing explicit to point to, right? You got to infer out, right? Infer out something. And then based on the inference, oh, they disagree over some. So it is a little bit harder, right? Maybe this approach is more. But anyway, I'll illustrate both because I want you to know that there are two different approaches, and it's up to you. It's up to you which one you want to take, whichever one you're more comfortable with, whichever one yields the right answer. But just know that generally speaking, as you're studying more and more, you're trying to push yourself in this direction. Okay, Antonio. One can live a life of moderation by never deviating from the middle course. All right, so Antonio's saying what a life of moderation entails. Life of moderation means you never deviate from the middle course. But, right? But just in case you're too excited to jump on the boat, I'm going to live a life of moderation. Let me tell you what you are missing out on. You're missing out, right? You lose the joy of spontaneity. You lose out on the opportunities that come to those who are occasionally willing to take great chances or go too far, right? Because remember, if you're living a life of moderation, you are never deviating from the middle course. So, well then, yeah, by definition, you're going to miss out on opportunities that are only available to those who do take chances, who do go too far, who do deviate from the middle course, in other words. Right now, perhaps some of you notice that this perennial idea of the prescriptive and the descriptive is rearing its head again, right? Antonio participates in both, gives information that reveals his position at both levels. At the descriptive level, what is a life of moderation? Forget the question of whether a life of moderation is good or bad, right? Is he doing it? Should you do it? Should anybody else do it? Should we all avoid it? Forget that. That's prescriptive. Just at the descriptive level, what is a life of moderation? Well, he tells you, never deviate from the middle road. So he does offer some comment at the descriptive level. Now, what about the prescriptive level? Does he offer any does he say anything? Is there any, maybe the tone of what he's saying? Is there anything in here to suggest that he kind of has revealed his preference for a life of moderation or against a life of moderation? Well, answer is yeah, there are clues in his claims. For example, look at this word joy is value laden, right? You lose the joy. You miss. Opportunity is value laden too. These are positive, right? You lose the joy is spontaneity. You lose the opportunity to come to those. See, you see, like there is a sense in which he kind of has revealed some preference against the life of moderation. Okay, so far, a lot of this, hopefully it's kind of sounds kind of reviewy, right? Because it's, but let's keep going. Let's take a look at Marla's claims, right? Marla says, wait, but one who in the interest of moderation never risks going too far is actually failing to live a life of moderation. One must be moderate even in one's moderation. Now, there's so many questions that we want to consider. I want you to consider here. First is, how does it hook up to this? Second is, at the prescriptive descriptive level, does Marla offer commentary on both or just one? Right? And of course, the two questions are related. First, let's see how Marla's claims respond, her response to Antonio. How does it hook up? Notice the referencing, right? Notice the referencing. Antonio says, living a life of moderation means you never deviate from the middle course. Marla says what? Well, if you never take risks by going too far, are you living a life of moderation? No, you're actually failing to live a life of moderation. To be actually moderate, you need to even be moderate in your moderation, meaning sometimes you do have to go a little bit too far. So here I think we've already uncovered the disagreement, and it's a definitional one. Antonio has a definition of a life of moderation as never deviating from the middle road. Marla says, wait, that's not a life of moderation. A life of moderation is sometimes deviating from the middle road, right? You have to be moderate even in your moderation. Now, that's the first question about how these two speakers or their comments are connected. The second question is just straight from Marla's perspective. Let's think about this prescriptive-descriptive divide again. Marla's claims here. Descriptive? Yes, descriptive. What a life of moderation is, right? To her, life moderation means, you got to be moderate even in your moderation. That's a true life of moderation. Prescriptive? Nothing. This is really important. Look at Marla's claims. One who in the interest of moderation risks never going too far is not being moderate. You have to be moderate in your moderation. Now you ask Marla, okay, so I got that that's your sense of what a life of moderation is. Would you recommend it to me? Should I try to live a life of moderation according to your definition? What does Marla say? I don't know. I have no idea. Silence, right? Because Marla didn't use these value-laden terms that even hint at, right? I mean, unless I missed it, it doesn't seem like there's anything here that speaks to the prescriptive, to the value-revealed level of discourse. Rather, everything's just at the purely descriptive level, right? That's a big difference. Okay, so now I want to look at an answer choice B, which, if you're wondering, is the correct answer choice. What a life of moderation requires a person. Why is this the disagreement question? Because if you ask Antonio to say, hey, what a life of moderation requires of a person, what would he say? He would say, a life of moderation requires that you never deviate from the middle course. Right? Now you ask the same question to Marla. What would a life of moderation require of a person? What would she say? Well, first she would say, not that, right? Because she explicitly says that's failing to live a life of moderation. What she would say is that you have to be moderate even in your moderation, meaning you can't never deviate from the middle course. Sometimes you have to deviate from the middle course. So there's the explicit level of disagreement over what a life of moderation requires of a person. Now, to put this in the framework that I introduced in the theory, really what this answer choice is saying, I mean, there's another way to write this answer choice such that it will still be right. And in fact, you'll see this other way in the wrong answer choices, okay? I know it's kind of confusing, but let me just illustrate that by amending this, right? Instead of leaving it as an open-ended question of what a life of moderation requires of a person, just say this, right? Life of moderation requires never deviating from the middle course, right? And you see here, I'm just verbatim repeating Antonio's claims. Now you can see, okay, well, yeah, of course, Antonio would agree. There's strong support. In fact, it's more than support. It's just explicitly stated. He just explicitly states this, right? And now you can see how there's anti-support, right? Anti-support coming from Marla. A life of moderation requires never deviating from the middle course. No, you have to deviate from the middle course because the life of moderation requires that you be moderate even in your moderation. Okay, so now it's the outside writer's choice of whether to phrase a question like like a simple, yes, I agree with this, no, I disagree with this, or phrasing it in the way that they did, which is by sort of more open-ended, right? Like, what does the life of moderation require? Well, Antonio says one thing, Marla says not that thing, right? So this is just a way for them to, hide it a little bit, right? Hide the right answer choice a little bit. Okay, I think this point becomes clear. Let's just look at another answer choice and you'll see what I mean. For example, A, which says whether it's desirable for people to occasionally take great chances in life, right? This is just a claim where you can be like, oh, yes, it is desirable, or no, it's not desirable. Versus B is not something you can be like, oh, yes, what does the life of moderation require of a person? Yes, right? I don't think you understood the question. You can't just answer yes to this original formulation of B, but you can for A, right? Is it desirable for people to occasionally take great chances in life? And here, let me now pivot over to the process of elimination method, right? For the process elimination method, you just take one of these two people's perspective and you just ask yourself, hey, if I'm just Marla, right? If I'm just Marla, what would I say to answer choice A? Is it desirable for people to occasionally take great chances in life? I would have no idea what to say to that. Because like I said, A is a value-laden claim. Marla didn't say whether a life of moderation is desirable to begin with. Now, if she had said, by the way, life of moderation, and by life of moderation, I mean my meaning of life of moderation, that's a good life. You should achieve that life. You should strive for that life. Well, then I think she would say, sure, yes, right? It is desirable because you want to live life of moderation. Living a life of moderation means that you sometimes have to take great chances. So I guess, yes, right? But she doesn't say that. Her claims are strictly descriptive, which means she doesn't reveal an opinion on answer choice A, which means you can get rid of answer choice A. An answer like this, like A, where one person takes no position on, can never be the right answer. Because at this point, it just doesn't matter what Antonio's position is. Antonio could answer yes to this question. Antonio can answer no to this question. Either way, you're not going to generate a disagreement because Marla takes no position on the question, right? You see what I mean? If I take no position on whether a cat is good or bad, I really don't care how you feel about cats. You're not going to disagree with me, right? Because I took no position. So this is the process of elimination approach. Now let's do the same for C, D, and E, right? C, notice the phrasing and see whether it's possible for a person to embrace other virtues along with moderation. Again, this is the way that the question is phrased. You can answer yes or no to that, right? It is possible, yes. No, it's not possible. And same with E, whether it is desirable. So you can answer yes, it is, or no, it's not. So grammatically, A, C, and E are similar, right? Similar in that respect, in that they're generating questions where you can respond yes or no to. And B and D are similar in that they're generating more open-ended questions where there's a sort of variety of responses you could give. Okay? But let's look at C. Is it possible for a person to embrace other virtues along with moderation? Again, just from Marla's perspective, right? The purely descriptive. Is it possible for someone to embrace what's another virtue? Generosity, kindness. Can you be generous and live a life of moderation? I mean, Marla doesn't say, right? I mean, if you ask me, I have an opinion, but that's not relevant, right? And I'm sure if you allow Marla more space to speak, if Marla's a normal functioning human being, I'm sure she actually has an opinion on this question. But given that this is all she said, how could you support either a yes or no? No, it's not. No, if you embrace moderation, that precludes all other virtues. What about this suggests that? Nothing, right? Okay, now take the opposite view. Yes, you embrace moderation, you can still be generous and kind and, whatever other virtues. Again, what about her claims here suggests that's the case? Nothing. So just like answer choice A, because Marla hasn't revealed her position, we can get rid of it. It just doesn't matter what Antonio's position is on this. Right now, for D and E, I want you to pick up on the fact that they're also prescriptive. How often ought a person to deviate from the middle course in life? Whether it is desirable for someone to be moderately spontaneous. Just like A, how we got rid of A. From Marla's perspective, Marla did not reveal an opinion on these prescriptive, right? These prescriptive positions. Is it desirable for someone to be moderately spontaneous? Well, Marla would say, it depends. Do you want to be moderate? Right? If you want to live in moderation, well, then to live a life of moderation, you need to be moderate in your moderation. So sure, I suppose it's desirable then for you to be, I don't know, a little bit spontaneous. I don't know about moderately spontaneous, sometimes spontaneous, right? And same here. How often should you deviate from the middle course? Mario's like, I don't know what kind of life you want to lead, right? If you want to live a life of never deviating from the middle course, then the answer is 0. You should never deviate from the middle course. But if you want to live a life of moderation according to my definition, well, then the answer is, I can't tell you a specific answer, a precise answer, but, sometimes you need to deviate. Do you see what I mean? Like, it's really important to keep this prescriptive, descriptive distinction sharp in your mind because, well, as we see here, so many of the trap answer choices play with you precisely on this point. And you can see that these other answer choices are made all the more attractive precisely because Antonio does straddle both worlds, right? In Antonio's claims, there is a descriptive portion here, and then there's a prescriptive portion here, which is why so many of the answers get to survive this, I get to talk prescriptive, because, well, at least Antonio shows says something prescriptive.